3 years ago, after my husband, daughter, and I were in an accident, my parents refused to come to the hospital to help us just because they had a necessary appointment with my brother. 3 days later, when we laid my daughter to rest, they still didn't show up. Their cruelty made one thing painfully clear to me. I had never truly been a part of their family in their eyes. But why would they do that? And what kind of consequences would they have to face? Stay with me. I'm going to tell you everything that happened. Hello, everyone. My name is Eve. I'm 33 years old and currently living in San Diego. The tragedy in my family happened 3 years ago, and to this day, we still haven't been able to forget what happened. Every night before going to sleep, those horrifying images still come back like a nightmare I can't escape. I still remember very clearly that it was a weekend in August 2022. Around 4 p.m., I was taking my husband Ray and my daughter Violet, who was only 5 then, to have dinner with my grandfather, Robert. My grandfather was 77 years old that year. He lived alone in Oceanside, about a 40-minute drive from San Diego, and we would often visit him on the weekends because he was very lonely after my grandmother passed away. Violet was very attached to him. Their relationship was especially close, maybe because Robert always gave Violet his love. Whenever she knew we would visit him, she would be very excited, and that day was no exception. Since early morning, Violet asked several times when we would go to Great-Grandpa's house. In the car while I was driving, and Ray was in the passenger seat, Violet kept talking about Great-Grandpa Robert. Sitting in the safety seat in the back, she innocently told stories about the fairy tales he had read to her last week. My husband and I listened attentively, sometimes smiling happily at our daughter's innocence. After about 20 minutes on the road, suddenly from the opposite lane, a truck lost control, crossed the median, and crashed head-on into the passenger side where Ray was sitting. The sound of metal crashing and glass shattering rang out. After that, everything went dark. I don't know how long I was unconscious. I only remember waking up in the ICU with my head bandaged and my left arm broken. As soon as I opened my eyes, a doctor came to my bedside and gently said to me, "Eve, I'm Dr. Martinez. I'm very sorry to tell you this. Violet passed away due to severe injuries." Hearing the doctor's words, it felt like my heart stopped. I couldn't believe my ears. My 5-year-old daughter, the little girl who had innocently talked in the car a few hours earlier, was now gone. I asked about Ray. Dr. Martinez looked concerned and said, "Your husband is still in emergency surgery. He has internal injuries and multiple broken ribs. We're doing everything we can, but the risk of complications is still very high." At that moment, I felt like my world had collapsed entirely. I couldn't believe the harsh reality. In just a few seconds, my happy family was shattered beyond repair. I fell into a despair that no words could describe. After Dr. Martinez left the room, with trembling hands, I picked up my phone and called my parents. The first call rang for a long time before going to voicemail. I called again, a second time, then a third. No one answered. With a choked, shaky voice, I left an urgent voicemail. In the message, I told them, "Dad, Mom, my family was just in a serious car accident. Violet, she's gone. Ray is in emergency surgery and it's really critical. Please call me back as soon as you hear this." About 5 minutes later, my phone finally buzzed with their message. Hope lit up inside me, but instead of comfort or concern, my mother Shirley replied in an irritated tone, "Eve, your dad and I are preparing for Michael's girlfriend's welcome party. Let's talk later, okay?" Hearing her voice message, a wave of rage surged through me. I called them back immediately, but they declined the call. I called 3 more times. Every single one was rejected. At that point, I just wanted to smash the phone in my hand. About 10 minutes later, trying to pull myself together, I called my in-laws, William and Margaret. On the very first ring, William picked up. As soon as I told him about the accident, he responded with a choked voice, "Eve, we're leaving right now. Margaret and I will be there within 3 hours." I could hear my mother-in-law sobbing uncontrollably in the background. Neither of them asked anything else. They just promised to get to the hospital as soon as possible. About 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Grandpa Robert. I took a deep breath and picked up, trying to steady myself. Right away, my grandfather asked with concern in his voice, "Eve, why haven't you all arrived yet? I already prepared everything to welcome you." Hearing his words, I hesitated, but ended up lying to him. I said, "Grandpa, we had a small accident on the way. We probably won't be able to make it today." I didn't have the heart to tell him the truth. At 77 years old, I was afraid the shock of Violet's death would be too much for him to handle, but somehow he sensed something was wrong in my voice. Without needing much time to think, before hanging up, he said, "Wait there for me. I'm calling a taxi to the hospital right now." After that call, sitting alone in the hospital room, I was overwhelmed with a deep sense of loneliness as I thought about my own parents' absence. In the darkest, most painful moment, they were too busy hosting a party for my brother. In that moment, I realized my little family meant nothing to them. After the call with Grandpa, a nurse led me to the room where Violet was lying. As I stepped in, my legs felt like they were weighed down with iron. She lay silently on the white hospital bed, looking as if she were simply in a deep sleep. I slowly sat on the chair beside her and held her tiny, ice-cold hand. Images of Violet kept flooding my mind. I remembered a photo of her grinning from ear to ear on her 5th birthday 2 months ago, her face covered in chocolate cake. I thought about her favorite toys, her pink teddy bear named Mr. Cuddles, and the princess picture books she loved. Her laughter still echoed in my ears. I remembered the time we practiced riding a bike together at Balboa Park. She had just turned 4, pedaling on her little pink bicycle with training wheels. With a serious, grown-up tone, she said, "Mommy, I'm ready to become a professional biker." I couldn't help but smile at the memory. Violet always had this way of using adult words, even though she was just a little girl. I also remembered last week's movie night when our family watched a cartoon. Out of nowhere, Violet stood up and started singing along with the soundtrack, but she completely messed up the lyrics. Instead of let it go, she sang, let her go, let her go." With the most serious look, Ray and I laughed so hard that our stomachs hurt, while Violet thought we were praising her for singing. Then, with a proud little voice, she declared, "I'm going to be a famous singer and perform for the whole world." After she said that, Ray and I clapped and told her we believed in her dream. But now, all of those dreams had come to an end. I blamed fate for being so cruel, for taking her away without warning. And then the deepest regrets began to flood in. Just last week, when I was stressed out from work, Violet came running to ask if I could play dolls with her. Instead of spending time with her, I snapped and yelled, "Mommy's busy, go play somewhere else." I remembered the look on her face, sad, those big round eyes filling with tears. She didn't say a word, just quietly walked out of the room. At the time, I thought I was teaching her to respect an adult's working time. I also remembered my promise to buy her a new doll set if her teacher praised her. Violet had excitedly told everyone at preschool about the doll set she was going to get, but I forgot, caught up in a new project at work. There was also the time I promised to take her to the zoo that weekend, but instead I chose to stay home and watch football. Violet stood at the door with her little backpack, waiting the whole morning. With tears rolling down my cheeks and a voice choked with sorrow, I whispered to her, "Violet, forgive me. I wasn't the mother you deserved." Sitting in that cold hospital room, I silently prayed that Ray would survive the grip of death. I couldn't bear the thought of losing both of the most important people in my life. At the same time, I blamed myself for failing to protect my family. My thoughts were filled with tormenting questions. Why didn't I take a different route? Why wasn't I more careful while driving? Those thoughts kept eating away at me. The hospital room was too bright, with its sterile, white fluorescent lights, too quiet except for the constant hum of the air conditioner, and too unfamiliar with the pungent smell of disinfectant. Every sound of a nurse's footsteps in the hallway made me jump, terrified they might bring bad news about Ray. I took out my phone and texted Ray. Even though he couldn't read it, I wrote, "Baby, I'm right here waiting for you. Violet is sleeping peacefully. We're going to get through this together." But the moment I hit send, the cruel reality came crashing back. Violet would never wake up again. A lump rose in my throat as silent tears streamed down my face. I couldn't even cry out loud, only shake with grief. Right then, I made a promise to myself. No matter what happens, I have to stay strong for Ray. I knew I had to be stronger than ever to hold together what was left of our family. As I sat there drowning in grief beside Violet, my phone suddenly buzzed with a notification from Instagram. At first, I would ignore it, but when I saw Michael's name on the screen, I figured maybe my brother had heard the news and was reaching out to offer his condolences. But when I opened the notification, what appeared before me was a photo gleaming with lights. My entire family, my father Edward, my mother Shirley, and Michael with his girlfriend, were raising champagne glasses in a lavish party setting. Below the picture was the caption, "Perfect evening celebrating family unity. I am so grateful for these amazing moments with my parents and for introducing them to the love of my life, Jessica." I scrolled down to see more. They were smiling brightly, posing with expensive dishes, even sharing a video where Michael kissed our parents on the cheek while Jessica laughed blissfully beside them. Not a single photo, not a single caption, not even a comment mentioned the accident or the granddaughter they had just lost. It felt like my heart had dropped into a bottomless pit. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. While I was sitting next to my daughter's lifeless body, while Ray was fighting for his life in the operating room, they were clinking glasses and celebrating like nothing had happened. My hands trembled as I quickly locked the screen. I was terrified that if I looked for even one more second, I would completely break down. Those images burned themselves into my memory like blades carving into my heart. I kept asking myself, how could they be celebrating like this right now? Did they forget the urgent message I left? Or did they see it and still decide the party was more important? A deep, aching sense of betrayal rose from within. These were the people I once called family, the ones I had loved and trusted most. But now, when I needed them more than ever, they ignored my pain and indulged in their joy. I silently prayed that Ray would never see those photos. If my husband ever found out that his in-laws brushed off this horrific tragedy to celebrate, it would only deepen his pain. Sitting in that quiet room with my daughter, who was no longer alive, I felt utterly cut off from the rest of the world. About an hour after the call with Grandpa, I heard hurried footsteps echoing down the hospital hallway. Moments later, he appeared in the doorway, breathless from rushing. He had taken a taxi and even at 77 years old, had pushed himself to move as fast as he could to get to us. When he saw me sitting beside the hospital bed, Grandpa Robert came over and asked, his voice full of concern, "What happened, Eve?" At that point, I couldn't hide the truth from him. Choking back tears, I said, "Grandpa, Violet didn't make it. She passed away." The news hit him like a brick wall. He froze in place, then collapsed into a plastic chair beside me. He buried his face in his hands and broke down in sobs that echoed through the small room. The raw, gut-wrenching cries of a grandfather who had just lost the granddaughter he loved most. After a while, he looked up with red, swollen eyes and started blaming himself. He said to me, "It's my fault. I'm the one who asked everyone to visit. If I hadn't made that call, you wouldn't have been on the road today." I rushed over to him, wrapped my arms around his shoulders, and gently patted his back. "It's not your fault," I said. "It was an accident. None of us could have seen this coming." But he wouldn't stop blaming himself. He wiped his tears and looked around the room. "Where are your parents?" he asked. "Why aren't they here?" I hesitated momentarily, then pulled out my phone and opened Instagram to show him the photos. When he saw my dad, Mom, and Michael clinking glasses and smiling like nothing had happened, his expression instantly shifted to outrage. Muttering under his breath with clenched teeth, he said, "Those bastards. How could they do this?" His hands started trembling with anger. Without wasting another second, he pulled out his phone and called my dad. The first call went unanswered. He tried again. Nothing. The third time, declined. Overcome with fury, Grandpa threw his phone down hard against the floor. The loud crack of the screen shattering echoed through the room, a reflection of the rage he could no longer contain. Then he turned back to me, tears streaming down again, and said with a voice full of regret, "I'm sorry, Eve. I failed to raise my son right. I raised a man without a heart." After that, he pulled me into a tight embrace, and the two of us cried together. At that moment, I felt genuine love from my grandfather, something I hadn't felt from my parents in a long time. Once he had calmed down, he held my hand and spoke with quiet determination. "We're going to take care of Ray together, and we'll give Violet the farewell she deserves. I won't let you go through this alone." Hearing those words, I nodded. Despite being abandoned by my parents, I still had my grandfather, the one person in the family who truly loved me and put me first. And in that moment, I felt grateful that I still had someone who stood firmly by my side, even in my darkest hour. Around 10 p.m., hurried footsteps once again echoed down the hospital hallway. William and Margaret, my in-laws, appeared with worry written all over their faces the moment they saw me and Grandpa Robert. They rushed in and embraced us tightly, breaking down in tears as they heard the news about Violet. After a few minutes, Margaret calmed herself and asked about Ray's condition. When she learned that her son-in-law was still in critical condition following surgery, she immediately went into the recovery room. Standing beside Ray's bed, she held his unconscious hand and whispered, her voice filled with emotion, "Ray, you have to come back to us. We need you here." Meanwhile, my father-in-law was outside speaking with Dr. Martinez, trying to understand every possible treatment option. With a serious yet deeply caring tone, he asked, "Doctor, can you tell me more about my son-in-law's condition? We're willing to do whatever it takes to save him." After finishing the conversation, William returned to join me and Grandpa Robert. Noticing how worn out I looked and realizing I hadn't eaten since that afternoon, he gently urged me like a father would, "Eve, you need to eat something. You have to stay strong. Ray will need you when he wakes up." Margaret agreed and offered to take shifts at Ray's bedside so I could get some rest. Seeing Grandpa Robert sitting quietly in the corner, weighed down by sorrow, William walked over and sat beside him. With sincere respect, he said, "Thank you for being the first to rush here when our family needed someone. It means a lot to all of us." Margaret also came over, placing a comforting hand on Grandpa's shoulder. "Please don't blame yourself," she said softly. "This accident wasn't anyone's fault." They offered to take care of Violet's funeral arrangements so I could focus entirely on Ray. William looked at me and said, "Let us handle everything. Eve, all you need to do is be there for Ray." Margaret, meanwhile, began making phone calls to inform relatives on her side of the family, asking them to offer support during this difficult time. Eventually, we all came to agree on one critical thing. William spoke seriously. "We shouldn't tell Ray about Violet right after he wakes up. The shock could make things worse for him." Margaret nodded and added, "That's right. We'll wait until he's more stable, then break the news gently." At that moment, I felt overwhelming gratitude for my in-laws. They had become my emotional anchor, the support I so desperately needed at a time when my own parents were nowhere to be found. And in that realization, I understood something important. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you when everything falls apart. 3 days after the accident, Violet's funeral was held at St. Mary Funeral Home in downtown San Diego. Though it was a small service, the room overflowed with love. Family, friends, and members of the community came to say goodbye. Violet's preschool classmates showed up with their parents, along with our neighbors and colleagues of both mine and Ray's, all there to share in our grief. But what struck everyone the most was the complete absence of Edward and Shirley, Violet's maternal grandparents. When people asked about them, I could only shake my head and say they had something else going on. For those 3 days, my parents continued posting a stream of vacation photos from Hawaii, pictures of them on Waikiki Beach, dining at luxury 5-star resorts, and even surfing videos with Michael and his girlfriend Jessica. Not a single post, not one photo, not one caption mentioned that their granddaughter had died. The reaction from our extended family was swift and harsh. Outrage spread quickly. Aunt Helen, my mother-in-law's older sister, even commented under one of their posts, "How can you be vacationing while your granddaughter is being laid to rest?" Seeing how everyone responded, I knew without a doubt that my parents were entirely wrong. Because Edward and Shirley were absent, Grandpa Robert stepped in to speak on behalf of Violet's maternal family. His voice was trembling but solemn as he stood before everyone and said, "Violet was a little angel who brought light into all our lives. Her time with us was short, but the love she gave will stay in our hearts forever." Many at the service, friends, relatives, even people who barely knew us, came forward afterward to voice their shock at the shameful absence of my parents. Dave, one of my closest colleagues, even said aloud, "I can't believe Edward and Shirley skipped their granddaughter's funeral to go on vacation. That's something I'll never be able to forgive." As the service ended, I carefully placed Violet's portrait back in its box. It was a photo of her grinning from ear to ear on her 5th birthday. I looked into her bright, joyful eyes and made her a silent promise. "I'll keep living with kindness, Violet. I'll become the kind of mother you'd be proud to call your mom." As people began leaving, I stood alone, gazing at the overcast sky. The heavy gray clouds mirrored the weight I felt inside. But in that moment, Something powerful rose in me, a quiet, unshakable resolve. I had to be stronger. For Ray, who was still waiting for me in the hospital, for Grandpa, who needed my support, and for Violet, whose memory I had to carry with grace. I couldn't let myself fall apart. That afternoon, after Violet's funeral, I was sitting quietly beside Ray's hospital bed when Grandpa Robert arrived. He looked serious and said, "Eve, I need you to come with me. There's something important we have to take care of today." Seeing the weight in his expression, I didn't ask any questions. I nodded and followed. Later that day, we took a taxi downtown to the offices of Henderson and Associates, a law firm in San Diego. The space was elegant, lined with towering shelves of legal books. I still had no idea why Grandpa had brought me there. We were greeted by James Henderson, a man in his early 50s. Once we sat down, Grandpa didn't waste any time. He looked at the lawyer and said plainly, "I want to revoke my old will immediately, and I'm transferring all my assets to Eve." I froze. It took me a few seconds to process what I just heard. Then I tried to stop him, but Grandpa looked me straight in the eye and said firmly, "No, you must understand. You're the only one who deserves what I have." After hearing his request, Mr. Henderson began drafting the documents. Grandpa transferred full ownership of everything he had to me: the house in Oceanside, worth $800,000, a savings account totaling $400,000, and an investment portfolio of $300,000. He also gave Mr. Henderson full legal authority to handle further paperwork or proceedings. But what shocked me even more was Grandpa's subsequent request. He looked at Mr. Henderson and said sternly, "I want you to prepare a formal notice demanding that Edward and Shirley repay the $100,000 they borrowed from me 3 years ago." Mr. Henderson took notes and asked, "Do you have any documentation for this loan?" Without hesitation, Grandpa pulled out a handwritten agreement signed by Edward. "This is the promissory note," he said. "It includes a 5% annual interest rate. The original repayment deadline was 2 years, and they're now 1 year overdue." Mr. Henderson calculated everything and then drafted a formal notice stating that the total amount due was $115,000 with payment required within 30 days of receiving the letter. Once all the paperwork was finished, Grandpa turned to me and said quietly but firmly, "Listen carefully. This money isn't for you to spend freely. It's to protect Ray and your family's future. I don't want you worrying about finances while he's still recovering." My eyes welled with tears. The depth of love and sacrifice in his gesture overwhelmed me. A few moments later, he added, "At 77, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I need to know that you and Ray will never have to depend on people like Edward and Shirley, who showed no care when you needed them most." And right then and there, I signed the documents with a promise from the bottom of my heart. "I swear I'll use this responsibly to take care of Ray and to build the kind of family you'd be proud of." As we left the law office, it hit me. Grandpa wasn't just protecting my future. He was sending a powerful message to my parents about the consequences of their coldness and selfishness. In that moment, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for having someone in my corner who truly cared about me and the life I was trying to rebuild. 3 days after the funeral, as I sat beside Ray's hospital bed, I heard familiar footsteps echoing down the hallway. I turned and saw Edward, Shirley, and Michael walking toward the room. They were dressed formally, their skin still tanned from the Hawaii trip. When I saw them, a wave of fury exploded inside me like a volcano. I rushed out of the room and shouted, "Get the hell out of here. I don't need sympathy from cold-blooded people." Shirley flinched at my anger, while Edward tried to keep his composure. Michael stood behind them, still wearing that same self-righteous expression he always did. After my outburst, Edward stepped forward, trying to sound remorseful. "Eve, we know we were wrong, but we had everything planned. It was hard to cancel at the last minute." Shirley chimed in with her fake tears. "Please try to understand. Michael's trip was essential. We're heartbroken over Violet too, but there was nothing we could do." Michael, keeping his serious tone, nodded in agreement. "That's right, Eve. Mom and Dad are grieving, but they also had obligations. They were supporting me." Hearing those excuses cut through me like a blade. The rage and heartbreak made my hands tremble. I couldn't believe they were actually saying this to my face. Right then, Grandpa Robert stepped out from Ray's room. His voice was cold as steel, and his eyes were sharp as glass. When he looked at me and said, "Eve, don't forgive them. They already received the notice about the debt, and they will pay. Edward's face went pale. He stuttered, "Dad, why would you do that? We couldn't cancel Michael's engagement party." At that moment, William and Margaret, my father-in-law and mother-in-law, arrived. William spoke first, his voice stern and cutting. "If you truly regret what you did, kneel at Violet's grave for 7 days. That's the least you can do." But Grandpa Robert cut in, his voice razor sharp. "There's no need. Violet wouldn't want grandparents like this." The hallway fell into a heavy silence. Other patients and families started watching. A nurse came by to remind us to keep our voices down. Edward tried one last time to salvage the moment. "Eve, let's sit down and talk. I believe we can work this out." But I shook my head. My voice was cold, steady. "There's nothing to work out. You made your choice. Now live with it." Shirley reached out, trying to hug me, but I stepped back. With desperation in her voice, she said, "You can't just cut your parents out like this. We're still your family." Her words made my stomach turn. I looked straight into their eyes and said, "Family died the day Violet did. You killed it with your indifference." In that moment, I realized something. Some things, once shattered, can never be put back together. And family, no matter the bloodline, is no exception. When I firmly rejected all attempts at reconciliation, their entire demeanor shifted. The fake sorrow on their faces quickly turned into anger and resentment. Edward turned toward Grandpa Robert, his eyes filled with hostility. The moment he realized I wasn't backing down, my father's face turned red with rage as he shouted at Grandpa, "He has manipulated you. He's poisoned you to steal the family's money." Right after that accusation, Michael's expression twisted with malice. He glared at me and growled through clenched teeth. "Don't think this is over. I will expose you to the entire family. Show them who you are." Sensing the escalation, my mother launched into a loud, theatrical sobbing fit, trying to draw attention from passers-by. Right there in the hospital hallway in front of patients and families, she wailed, "Oh God, my own daughter turned her back on her parents. All for money. I gave birth to a heartless, ungrateful child." The baseless accusations made my whole body tremble with fury. But before I could respond, Grandpa Robert calmly turned to the nearby nurse and asked her to call security immediately. Not even a minute later, 2 hospital security officers arrived. After Grandpa explained the situation, the lead officer addressed them firmly. "You all need to leave this treatment area immediately. Disruptive behavior like this is not allowed in the hospital." When my father began to protest, the second officer stepped in, warning, "If you don't leave voluntarily, we will contact the police." That shut them down quickly. They left reluctantly, under escort. I pulled out my phone and blocked all 3 of them when they were gone. I wouldn't let their poison reach Ray when he woke up. Afterward, I called Mr. Henderson immediately. Still rattled, I told him, "They showed up at the hospital and caused a scene. I'm worried this won't be the last time. Please prepare any legal actions we might need." William and Margaret had witnessed everything. Outraged and concerned, William placed a comforting hand on my shoulder and said, "Eve, go home and get some rest. We'll stay here with Ray. You need to protect your peace right now." Just before I left, Grandpa Robert grabbed my shoulder gently and looked me in the eyes. "Don't worry about a thing," he said. "I'll take care of all of it. They won't be able to touch you." And in that moment, I saw it clearly. The people I once called family had finally shown their true colors, revealed who they were when their self-interest was threatened. That afternoon, just after I got home from the chaos at the hospital, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications from social media. Edward, Shirley, and Michael had launched their counterattack, posting videos to Facebook and Instagram almost immediately. In the first video, Edward and Shirley sat in their living room, faces contorted into exaggerated sorrow. My father, voice trembling like a victim, spoke directly into the camera. "We are victims of cruel manipulation. Our daughter has been influenced to turn against her own family." Right after that, my mother joined in the performance, her eyes fake red from crocodile tears. She choked out, "We're heartbroken. Eve took advantage of her grandfather's age and stole the family's assets. It's truly heartbreaking." Michael, of course, posted a separate video of his own, wearing that same self-righteous glare. His voice filled with manufactured outrage as he declared, "I ask everyone to stand with our family. We need your support to fight this injustice." What stood out the most was what they didn't say. Not a single word about the horrific accident. There was no mention of Violet's funeral, nor did they ever show up. They completely ignored the pain of the past week and focused entirely on playing the victim, painting me as the ungrateful, greedy daughter. Predictably, some gullible people who didn't know the whole story began to comment in their favor. Linda, one of my mother's longtime friends, wrote, "How could a child treat their parents like this?" Someone else chimed in, "Kids these days only care about money, no respect for their elders." Reading those comments made my blood boil, but I kept my silence. I refused to engage in a social media war. Instead, I quietly saved everything, every video link, every screenshot of the comments and shares, and archived them carefully as evidence. That evening, when Grandpa Robert visited, I showed him all of it. He watched the videos from start to finish, shaking his head now and then. When it ended, he let out a faint, unimpressed laugh and said, "I knew they'd pull something like this. Don't worry, I already have a plan." Without wasting a moment, Grandpa picked up his phone and called Mr. Henderson, even though it was nearly 10 p.m. With unwavering resolve, he told him, "James, they've officially begun their smear campaign. I need you to start drafting the lawsuit tonight." Mr. Henderson agreed to work through the night to prepare all the necessary legal documents and compile the digital evidence. Grandpa also told me to keep collecting everything, every share, every comment, every twisted narrative they spread. That was the moment I fully realized this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was a battle over truth, over dignity and reputation. And thankfully, we weren't caught off guard. We were ready. The next morning, Mr. Henderson arrived at Grandpa Robert's house with a complete set of professional video equipment. Inside Grandpa's home office, they recorded a 15-minute video together to set the record straight. Speaking calmly but with firm resolve, Grandpa looked straight into the camera and said, "My name is Robert Miller. I'm 77 years old. Today, I'm speaking out to defend my granddaughter Eve from the baseless accusations made by my son Edward and daughter-in-law Shirley." At the same time, Mr. Henderson officially filed a lawsuit against Edward, Shirley, and Michael for defamation and spreading false information. His tone was serious and focused when he told me, "We have all the digital evidence we need. Every video, every comment, every share, all of it is archived and ready for court." While the legal battle moved forward, I focused on caring for Ray. Every day I went to the hospital, sat beside his bed, read to him, and talked to him, even though he hadn't regained consciousness yet. Fortunately, my in-laws and several close friends stepped up to help manage the social media fallout. They shared Grandpa's video on their Facebook pages, adding detailed explanations and correcting the narrative. Many of my coworkers joined in too, leaving comments about the truth of what really happened. Sitting at Ray's bedside, I felt a sense of calm knowing that justice was in motion. And in that quiet moment, I realized something important. Sometimes silence paired with truth is the loudest response you can give to those who try to destroy you. After Grandpa's response video was posted, a powerful wave of public reaction swept in. People who had attended Violet's funeral flooded the comment sections under the videos Edward, Shirley, and Michael had posted. Sarah, Violet's preschool teacher, commented under Shirley's video with visible outrage. "I was at Violet's funeral and you weren't there. How can you lie so shamelessly?" Dave, my close colleague, also spoke up, writing, "I saw Edward and Shirley posting vacation photos from Hawaii on their granddaughter's funeral day. This is beyond inexcusable." Even Mrs. Margaret, our neighbor of over 10 years, shared her own truth. "Eve is a devoted mother and wife. Everything they've said about her is false. I've seen firsthand how devastated she was after losing Violet." The online community responded swiftly. People began mass reporting their videos for false information and defamation. Within 48 hours, Edward and Shirley were forced to turn off comments on all their posts to shield themselves from the backlash. Eventually, they had no choice but to delete the videos after report counts surpassed platform thresholds. Michael temporarily deactivated his Facebook and Instagram accounts to escape the public's growing outrage. Their reputation in the local community took a brutal hit. Neighbors began avoiding them in public. The shops they frequented no longer welcomed them with the same warmth. Meanwhile, people who had initially believed their lies began apologizing to me. Linda, my mother's longtime friend, messaged me with genuine regret. "Eve, I'm so sorry for supporting them. I didn't know the truth, but this is heartbreaking." I made sure to thank every person who had spoken up in defense of our family. To Miss Sarah, I wrote, "Thank you for protecting Violet's memory and standing with our family. That means more than words can say." As the storm on social media faded, a sense of peace returned to our lives. I could finally focus all my energy on caring for Ray and waiting, hoping for the day he would wake up. After 20 days in a coma, Ray finally woke up. That day, I was sitting beside his hospital bed, reading quietly, when I noticed the slightest flutter in his eyelids and a faint movement in his fingers. My heart leapt, and I called Dr. Martinez immediately. With a gentle smile of relief, Dr. Martinez confirmed, Ray is out of critical condition. His vitals are stable. This is the good news we've been waiting for. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for weeks. Ray had truly made it through the worst. As he slowly came to, his eyes wandered around the hospital room, unfocused at first, then searching for me. When he spotted me, his voice came out dry and cracked, but filled with urgency. Eve, where's Violet? Is she okay? It was the question I had feared every single day since the accident. I gripped his hand tightly. My voice trembled as I said, Baby, Violet, she didn't make it. The words tore something open. Ray let out a gut-wrenching scream. No, that can't be. Where is she? Where's our daughter? He tried to sit up, despite how weak he was, his eyes darting in desperation. And then, as reality sank in, he collapsed back into the bed and sobbed uncontrollably. It was the sound of pure heartbreak, of a father breaking into pieces. His cries echoed down the hospital hallway, prompting nurses to rush in. I held him as tightly as I could, trying to shield him from a pain that was impossible to escape. In my arms, Ray shook violently, his entire body curled inward like he was trying to escape his skin. Between choked sobs, he cried, Why? Why, Violet? She was just a baby. She didn't even get the chance to grow up. Across the bed, his mother sat gripping Ray's hand, whispering through her own tears, Violet is with God now, sweetheart. We're going to get through this together. Grandpa Robert stood just outside the door, not wanting to intrude. I saw him quietly wiping his eyes as he listened to Ray cry. He wept for hours, sometimes screaming Violet's name and other times whispering self-blame through tears. I should have died instead, he said, his voice filled with guilt. I was her father. I should have protected her. Hearing him say that nearly broke me in half. All I could think was, if only I could take Violet's place, maybe none of this would have happened. Later, Dr. Martinez returned to lay out a complete recovery plan for Ray. In addition to physical therapy for his injuries, he'd need psychological care, intensive support to prevent him from falling into deep depression. With steady resolve, I told the doctor, I'll be with him every step of the way. However long it takes, I'll be there. Our family took shifts around the clock to care for him. Together, we helped him through each milestone, sitting alone, standing for the first time, taking his first steps again. In a quiet corner of the hospital room, we placed a smiling photo of Violet, her beaming face frozen in time, beside a fresh purple flower, her favorite color. Every time Ray looked at it, tears would fall. But slowly, something changed in those tears, from despair to strength. One quiet afternoon, Ray stared at the photo and whispered, I'll live for you. I'll be strong for you. In that moment, I knew no matter how hard the road ahead might be, we would walk it together, for Violet, in honor of the life she never got to live. After 2 months of preparing legal documents, the trial was finally held at the San Diego County Courthouse on a crisp October morning. The court agreed to hear both cases, the defamation lawsuit and the debt recovery of $100,000 from Edward and Shirley. Attorney Henderson presented everything in full before the judge: a clear timeline of the accident, Violet's funeral, the defamatory videos, and the signed loan agreement from Edward. The other side had nothing. No valid argument, no defense. The evidence was undeniable. The court's ruling was even stricter than we had anticipated. The judge issued a permanent restraining order. Edward and Shirley were barred from walking within 500 meters of our family. With a stern voice, the judge announced the sentence. Edward Miller and Shirley Miller are fined $3,000 for defamation and spreading false information on social media. Additionally, the court orders them to repay the $100,000 loan plus accumulated interest totaling $118,000 within 60 days of this ruling. They are also required to pay attorney fees and court costs. In the months that followed, their lives fell apart. Michael's girlfriend, Jessica, broke up with him after learning the whole truth about his family. She even posted publicly on Facebook, writing, "I can't be with a man whose family lacks basic morality." The local community began to view the Miller family as a cautionary tale. Neighbors avoided them. Some stores quietly refused them service after learning about their disgraceful behavior surrounding Violet's funeral. When we got the news that the court had ruled in our favor, Grandpa Robert exhaled deeply, visibly relieved. With a soft, comforting tone, he told me, "Justice has been served. Now it's time for you to focus on helping Ray heal." In the following weeks, I used a portion of the assets Grandpa had entrusted me to secure the best possible care for Ray. He was moved to a private recovery suite, fully equipped with advanced physical therapy facilities and monitored closely by a specialized trauma psychologist. Ray's parents also arranged a private memorial service for Violet. Pastor Johnson from Holy Cross, the same church where we used to take Violet every Sunday, came to the hospital to offer prayers for her soul. With reverence in his voice, Pastor Johnson said to us, "Violet is now in a place beyond pain. Her spirit will always be with you, watching over this family." After the service, our entire family, myself, Ray's parents, and Grandpa, made a unified decision. We would never mention Edward, Shirley, or Michael in front of Ray again. He deserved space to heal, free from the shadows of the Miller family and the pain they had caused. Holding his hand as I sat beside his bed, I felt something lift, not just the burden of legal battles, but the emotional weight of injustice. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. Justice had been done. The wounds, though deep, could finally begin to heal. 3 years after the family drama, our lives had finally found peace. Ray had fully recovered, and we welcomed a new member into our family. Baby Aria, a joyful 1-year-old. She had her father's blue eyes and a bright smile that filled our home with laughter and light. Even with Aria in our arms, Ray and I never stopped holding space in our hearts for Violet. Every year on her birthday, we lit candles together in her memory. In those quiet moments, I could still feel her presence, as if Violet would always be part of our family in a different way. Grandpa Robert, now 80, had moved in with us from Oceanside. He adored Aria and spent hours reading her stories. Every afternoon, I'd glance out to the backyard and see him gently holding her in his lap, telling tales about farm animals, his voice soft, full of love. It was the kind of warmth I never knew in childhood. My in-laws, now retired, visited regularly from Los Angeles. My father-in-law had more time for family, and our weekends were often spent cooking together, watching movies, and simply enjoying each other's presence. It was a kind of wholeness I never thought I'd have. But while our lives grew brighter, the consequences of the past still haunted others. Edward and Shirley had become pariahs in their community. The weight of public judgment forced them to sell their home in Bakersfield and relocate to Arizona. A quiet escape from the shame they had brought upon themselves. I thought that dark chapter of my life was finally closed. I believed nothing could disturb the peace we had fought so hard for. But yesterday, as I was playing with Aria in the other room, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed. Aunt Marion, the only relative still in touch. Her voice trembled through the line. "Eve, your parents were in a car accident in Arizona. Your mother, she didn't make it. And your father's in a coma. He's in the ICU." My heart thudded in my chest. Though I had cut all ties with them, the news of my mother's death, the woman who had given birth to me, hit me harder than I expected. There was silence between us. Then Aunt Marion added gently, "The funeral's tomorrow in Phoenix. I think you should come to say goodbye. No matter what happened, she was still your mother." After the call, I sat in silence, holding Aria tightly. Memories from 3 years ago came rushing back. They raised champagne glasses the night Violet died. Their cruel words in the hospital, the lawsuit, the betrayal. But alongside that pain came forgotten memories. My mother rocking me to sleep as a child, helping me learn to ride a bike, holding me when I came home crying from school. Now I'm caught between two truths, the irreparable pain of what she did and the irreplaceable bond of what we once shared. Should I go and say goodbye, extend forgiveness in her final moment, or stand by the boundary I drew for my own healing? If you were me, what would you do? Would you go to the funeral and find closure, or stay away to protect the peace you've built? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I could really use your perspective right now, and if this story touched something in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more of these real moments from life. Thank you for listening.